Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And there the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, Here I am. Do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. And then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. At this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. Neuroscientists have proven now that the more we live at the beck and call of the latest email, phone call, or text message, the more our brains are being rewired for distraction rather than for presence. I saw this for myself when recently I was in London standing by the River Thames. As I took my time and gazed, many people stopped momentarily, pulling out a phone, taking a photo of Big Ben, the London Eye, the Shard, put the phone back in the pocket, and then quickly went away. Others, like me, just stood wondering, gazing left, gazing right, taking it all in. And the longer I stood there, the more these two very distinct ways of being became clear. Some went home with a digital image on their phone in their pocket. Others left having been inwardly moved by the external stimulus, perhaps not taking a photo at all. As chaplains, every time you go out of your door, you face the same choice. Am I going to be in charge, do the work, do the reporting and go home? Or am I going to go out and just see what happens? Chaplaincy is all about practicing the pause between experience and meaning. As Caroline Oakes writes, when we practice the pause in steady everyday practices, we train ourselves to move into that pause naturally and unconsciously. This happens not only physically in the rewiring of our neural pathways, but it happens in our consciousness, in our psyche, and in the centre of our heart. Pausing takes practice, especially in a world in which speed is rewarded. And pausing takes courage, especially when pushing through to get things done goes unchallenged and is actively encouraged. But when we practice the pause, we rewire our brains, with the result that we begin to pause in crucial moments without having to think about it. The movement becomes automatic because we have the wiring set in our brain and we have awakened an abiding sense of divine presence residing in our heart's centre. In Exodus 3, God appears to Moses in the burning bush precisely when Moses is at his lowest, furthest from home, a murderer, a fugitive on the run. He is full of shame and self-loathing, outside himself and no longer at home in his own skin. The life he used to live is consigned to history as he moves from place to place, doing his utmost to keep his terrible secret just that. But when word gets out and people start pointing the finger of blame at him, Moses flees from Pharaoh to Midian. Exodus 3 is often associated with a kind of thin place. Retreat centres are built there, and people often go there to discern the will of God for their lives. Some of us may have tried this, but this wasn't what Moses was doing. In fact, it's almost the opposite. His once-in-a-lifetime encounter with God happens, yes, when he is on the edge at the far reaches of the Sinai wilderness. But he did not go there to find God. He went there rather to escape humanity. And there are huge parallels, perhaps, with the folk we come across in our work as Waterways chaplains. As a nomadic shepherd, Moses wanders on to Mount Horeb, and in this arid and edgy place, he could easily have missed what happened with the bush. He could easily have dismissed it as a figment of his imagination or explained it away as a trick of the light. But out of the corner of his eye, on the periphery of his vision, a bush appears to be burning but is not consumed, and he notices it. He pauses. He wonders what is going on. And it's interesting to note that at this point in the narrative, the biblical text, which has until now been galloping along at a great pace, well, it dramatically slows down and becomes more reflective and expansive. Verse 2 tells us that Moses looked and looked and looked again. That's the significance of the word behold. It emphasizes the sustained quality of his looking. And behold, the bush was burning but was not consumed. And then in verse 3, we're taken inside Moses' brain as we hear his thought bubble. I will turn aside that I may look at, gaze upon, take in this great sight. Seemingly labouring the point, the text goes on in verse 4. When the Lord saw that Moses had turned aside to look, God called to him out of the bush. In these two short verses, we find two actions which lie at the heart, I think, of chaplaincy. Turning aside and looking, both of which are deliberate and intentional. Moses doesn't just take a fleeting glance at the bush before hurrying on to chase the next experience, the way the day trippers did looking at the River Thames just for a moment. Rather, Moses' looking was sustained. He turned aside to look not just with his eyes, but with his whole being. Turning aside to behold what you are looking at speaks of a wholehearted attention at the level of our whole being. And just as proper listening can be understood as proper loving, so proper looking can be as well. When we properly look and ask ourselves, what does this mean? Another question quickly follows on its heels. Given this, who am I when faced with this? And in verse 4, Moses notes that God is in this place. And he simply responds, here I am. Remember, God doesn't speak until after God notices that Moses is looking deeply. Here I am is the same response given by Abraham, Samuel, Isaiah, and Mary. Words which simultaneously convey amazement, vulnerability, and availability. Turning aside as chaplains to really see that which other people may only glimpse at helps us notice places of wonder and will over time lead us into humility and trust. And this is good. As we turn aside to deeply look, perhaps we will hear God speaking. As chaplains, we walk slowly and we pay attention. This is our calling, our duty and our joy. And this was last year's thought too. Nothing much changes. As we look, we see, we wonder, we understand as if for the first time. And the extra marvellous thing for me that I have noticed this year is that as we chaplain around the network, it also shapes us little by little. And our work, your work, increasingly leads us towards wonder, humility and trust. And all of this then rubs off on those we come alongside as well. God's marvellous economy of love grows not by our efforts, but by God's grace. I started this sermon thinking about London, but at the other end of the Thames in Oxford, I was there 2 weeks ago. It was a very different stretch. I was with my family and I was not in chaplaincy mode, and I did not have the time to stop and practice the pause. But I am absolutely sure that if I had, I would have encountered God, not perhaps across the water with the posh boat houses of the Oxford rowing clubs, but right in front of me. To finish these thoughts, I could cite dozens of poems, but I shall choose just one. Some of you will know it. R.S. Thomas's The Bright Field. I have seen the sun break through to illuminate a small field for a while, and gone my way and forgotten it. But that was the pearl of great price, the one field that had the treasure in it. I realize now that I must give all that I have to possess it. Life is not hurrying on to a receding future, nor hankering after an imagined past. It is the turning aside, like Moses, to the miracle of the lit bush, to a brightness that seemed as transitory as your youth once, but is the eternity that awaits you. Thank you for all your work this year. Amen.